Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive.
Definitely. Always ready to explore something new.
Well, today we're tackling something I think we all deal with pretty much every day. Stress.
Ah, stress, the universal experience, right?
Right. But here's the thing, we're not just talking about stress in general. We're looking at how connecting with others can actually help us overcome it.
Now that's an angle I'm interested in.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's like that feeling when you're totally overwhelmed and then you talk to a friend and suddenly things don't seem so bad.
Oh, yeah. I've been there a million times. It's like that feeling of, okay, I'm not alone in this crazy thing called life.
Exactly. And we've got some fascinating research that digs into this whole connection stress link. So let's dive in.
Sounds good to me. Lead the way.
All right. So you've given us some really interesting stuff to work with here. What struck me the most is this idea that connection isn't just some like fluffy feel-good thing.
Right. It's not just about being social.
Yeah, it's actually crucial to our well-being, like literally woven into our biology. It really is. We are wired for connection, from our brains to our very human instincts. And get this, when we get stressed, that need for connection, it goes into overdrive.
So it's not just me then. We're all hardwired to connect with each other.
You got it. It's science. And there's a really cool reason for that. Studies show that when we have good social support, our cortisol levels actually drop. Cortisol, the stress hormone.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one. So it's like our bodies are saying, hey, having backup makes tough stuff easier to handle.
Exactly. It's like instead of going into that fight or flight mode when things get rough.
We're more in that we got this zone.
Yeah, more like a rest and digest kind of state, which is when, your body can actually heal and recover.
Okay, so it's not just in my head, there's a real physical benefit to connecting with others.
Oh, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just the physical stuff either, right? There's a big emotional side to this whole connection thing.
Totally. Like when you finally share what's been bugging you and someone gets it, or when you're going through a tough time and someone just understands.
Exactly. That feeling of validation is huge. And you can't forget about laughing with your friends. That's got to be one of the best stress relievers out there.
It really is. It's like all that emotional weight just lifts a little when you know you're not alone.
Exactly. And that brings us to, well, all the different types of connections that can give us that support. We always hear about family and friends, but there's also community. That can be really powerful too.
Okay, yeah, let's break those down. Family, that's like our built-in support system, right? Though, gotta admit, family dynamics can be kind of messy sometimes.
True. Family relationships can be complicated. It's not always, picture perfect. But those connections run deep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Then there's friends, the people we choose to have in our lives. They get us, share our interests, and are there for all the good stuff and the bad stuff, like our chosen family almost.
Friendships are gold. They give us a sense of belonging, a space to be ourselves. And usually there's a lot of fun and laughter involved, which, like we said, is amazing for stress.
Totally. And finally, community. These are the connections that maybe aren't as close as family or best friends, but still give us that feeling of belonging.
Right. It's that feeling of being part of something bigger, whether it's with colleagues at work, neighbors, or people who share a hobby. It can give you this sense of purpose, like you're part of something meaningful, which can be so grounding when things are chaotic. Have you ever noticed that? Like even a small act of kindness from someone in your community can make a huge difference.
Oh, yeah. I remember when I first moved to a new city and felt so lost. A neighbor invited me over for dinner, and it honestly made all the difference. It's amazing how powerful that feeling of being part of something can be. I think we really underestimate it sometimes. But here's the thing, and maybe you can shed some light on this. How do we actually build and maintain these connections? Especially when life gets crazy and our stress levels are already through the roof. It's like, where do you even find the time or energy?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? We need connection most when we have the least amount of time for it.
Exactly. It feels like a catch-22 sometimes.
It really does. But it all comes down to conscious effort, making time for people, even small things like a quick text or a phone call, just to check in.
Yeah, it's funny how even those little things can remind you that you're not alone.
They really can. Those little interactions can go a long way in keeping those bonds strong.
So it's like making little deposits into a connection bank account, right? Even small amounts add up over time.
I love that analogy. It's about consistency, even when things are hectic.
That makes total sense. So we've got making time. What else can we do to, make those deposits, even when we're feeling stressed?
One of the simplest but most powerful tools is just active listening.
Mm.
And it's not just about hearing the words, you know?
Yeah, there's a difference between listening and just waiting for your turn to talk.
Exactly. Active listening is about being present in the conversation,
Hmm.
really tuning in, putting aside your own thoughts for a minute to truly absorb what the other person is sharing.
I feel like we can all sense when someone is really listening to us, right?
Absolutely. It makes you feel seen and heard, like you matter, which of course strengthens the connection between you.
It's a game changer, that's for sure.
It really is. And it's a skill like anything else. It takes practice,
Hmm.
but it's so worth it. Deeper connection, better conversations, and ultimately a stronger support system to help you through those tough times.
Totally. Okay, so we've got making time, active listening. Anything else we can do to build those connections, especially when we're stressed out?
This one might sound a bit counterintuitive, especially when you're already feeling stressed, but
Mhm.
being open and vulnerable can be huge.
Oh, yeah. I know what you mean. When I'm stressed, my instinct is to put on that I'm fine mask, even if I'm totally not fine.
Yeah, it's a natural defense mechanism.
Yeah.
But if we want real connection,
We have to let people see the real us.
exactly, even the messy parts.
So instead of pretending everything's perfect, it's about having the courage to say, hey, things are rough right now.
That's it. Because when we open up like that, it creates space for deeper conversations, more genuine support, and that feeling of you're not alone in this that we talked about earlier, which, let me tell you, does wonders for managing stress.
Being vulnerable isn't always easy, but I can see how it leads to those truly meaningful connections that can help us through tough times. Okay, so we've covered making time, active listening, being vulnerable. Anything else we should add to our connection toolkit?
Well, don't underestimate the power of shared activities. Sometimes connecting isn't about having these deep, intense conversations.
It's about doing things together.
Exactly. And it takes the pressure off, right? Going for a walk, trying a new recipe together, even just watching a movie and laughing.
It creates memories, inside jokes, that kind of camaraderie that strengthens the bond between you.
And when you have that shared history, it makes it easier to lean on each other when those stressful times inevitably pop up.
I love that. It's such a simple but powerful idea. Okay, so we've talked about why connection is so important, especially for managing stress, but let's get into the nitty-gritty. What are the actual benefits? Like beyond just feeling better, what does connection actually do for us when we're stressed?
Now we're getting to the really interesting stuff. We already touched on how connection can lower cortisol levels, right?
Yeah, which is huge in itself.
It is. But there's more. Turns out having good social connections can actually improve your overall mental health.
So it's not just a temporary mood boost, we're talking long-term resilience here.
Exactly. Studies show that people with strong social connections tend to have fewer symptoms of anxiety and depression. It's like having a built-in voice of reason when your own thoughts are going haywire.
Because when you feel supported and connected, you're less likely to get stuck in those negative thought loops.
You've got someone to talk to offer a new perspective, someone to remind you of your strengths.
Right, like, hey, remember that time you totally rocked that presentation? You got this.
That's the spirit. And speaking of strength, one of the most amazing benefits of connection is enhanced resilience. And by that, I mean the ability to bounce back from tough times, like a tree that bends in the wind instead of breaking.
I love that analogy. It's so visual.
It is, isn't it? And it makes sense when you think about it. Research actually shows that people who have strong social connections tend to be more resilient. They bounce back from stressful situations quicker, and they experience less emotional distress. They're less likely to have those long-term negative effects from going through something difficult.
It's not about being immune to stress. It's about having the tools and the support to navigate those challenges without being totally overwhelmed.
Well said. Your connections are like roots that anchor you, allowing you to bend and sway without snapping.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, how connection is basically part of our DNA, the different kinds of connections we can build, and the real tangible benefits of connection for dealing with stress. But, and this is something I've been thinking about, we've been focusing on how connection helps us. What if we flip that around?
Ooh, I like where you're going with this. Instead of how can connection help me, it's how can I be a source of connection for someone else?
Exactly. We've been talking about all the amazing ways connection benefits us, but what about the people in our lives who might be struggling? What if we made a conscious effort to reach out to someone who's having a tough time, just to offer a listening ear or let them know we're thinking of them?
It's amazing, isn't it? Even when you feel completely overwhelmed, just that tiny bit of effort to connect with someone can make a world of difference.
Yeah, it really can shift your whole perspective. It's like those little deposits we were talking about earlier. Those small acts of connection can really add up.
It's true, like little sparks of light reminding you that you're not alone in the darkness. And it doesn't have to be some grand gesture.
Right, it's not about like planning this elaborate thing.
No, not at all. Sometimes it's the simplest things that have the biggest impact. Just really listening to someone, being present in that conversation,
Mm.
or offering a genuine compliment. Things like that.
It's about making those connections feel seen and valued,
Yeah.
like you truly care.
Exactly. And it's not just about our closest friends and family either. Remember, we were talking about community. Those connections can be really powerful too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Have you ever experienced that, like feeling supported by someone in your community that you weren't necessarily expecting?
All the time. A kind word from a stranger, a helping hand from a neighbor, that feeling of belonging you get from a group of people who share your passion.
It's like a reminder that we're part of something bigger than ourselves, which can be so grounding, especially when you're feeling stressed.
Absolutely. And you know what's cool? You don't have to build those connections through deep conversations or big events. Sometimes the simplest interactions can create that sense of connection and belonging.
Like what?
Just think about it. A smile, a wave, a quick chat in line at the coffee shop. Those little moments can actually make a big difference.
They're like the glue that holds our communities together, all those little interactions.
That's a great way to put it. And this is something to keep in mind as we wrap up this deep dive. You don't have to wait for someone else to reach out to you.
You mean take the initiative?
Exactly. Reach out to a friend, a family member, a colleague, even a stranger. You never know how much a small act of connection can mean to someone.
It's like paying it forward with kindness and connection. We've talked about how much we benefit from feeling connected, but how often do we stop to think about offering that same support to others?
That's such an important point. We all need connection, especially when we're stressed. And sometimes being the one to reach out can be just as rewarding as receiving that support. It creates this ripple effect, spreading kindness and resilience throughout our communities.
I love that. So if we had to boil all this down to one key takeaway, what would it be?
Connection isn't a luxury, it's essential. It's as important to your well-being as sleep, healthy food, exercise. It's a necessity. And the best part is, it's a superpower we all have access to. We can share it with each other, build each other up, and make the world a little less stressful, one connection at a time.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And remember, listeners, we're all in this together. Let's make a conscious effort to reach out, to support each other, to lift each other up. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the power of connection. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and stay well.